What is your full name?
George Robert Dowling.
When were you born?
February 20th, 1928.
And where were you born?
On 1728 Thomas Avenue, Baltimore, Maryland.
What are the names of your parents?
My mother's name was Viola Dowling, and my father was George Vincent Dowling.
So you were named a little bit after your father.
Yes.
Any siblings?
One sibling, Eleanor.
She was older than you?
Yeah, about seven or 8 years old.
Okay. Can you tell me about your schools that you attended?
I went to St. Gregory's, the grade school, and for 8 years. And when I graduated, I went to Mount St. Joe for 4 years. Graduated.
And did you think of college? Was that an idea or
Never thought of college, you know. I don't know why, but I just never did, you know.
Mm-hmm. Going back to St. Gregory's, did you play sports for St. Gregory's?
Never
in
played
any plays?
sports. I was a great fan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. As a matter of fact, you know, I loved basketball, but when we were in grammar school, we never had it. We had our basketball net on the back of the school,
Mm-hmm.
but it was never used, you know. And we did have a baseball team, St. Gregory's. I was on that, you know,
Mm-hmm. What position?
first base.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you play at Thomas Avenue, like in the
Yeah,
neighborhood?
yeah. We used to play a lot down by what's the guy's name for Columbia?
Rouse.
Rouse, yeah, next to the Rouse Oil Company. It was a big lot, and we always played ball the whole summer. And we had, I don't know whether it was a league, but we were the Thomas Avenue Eagles. We had one hat.
That was your uniform. It's just a hat that you
We
had.
had the hat.
And what did you do for fun as a kid besides sports?
Well, we used to go over to Consolidated Engineering Yard when after they closed, and we would build houses with tile, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we built tree houses, and we went on hikes down to Bloomingdale,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, we pretty much when we grew up, our parents were never much with us. You know what I mean?
Did you ever get in trouble?
But no, we never got into trouble. I don't think. You know.
I mean, with the law.
No, I mean that I know of. Nobody went to jail.
Going back to school, did you have any favorite subjects?
Yeah, history. I liked history.
Were there any major illnesses or health problems that you had in your life
I mean, growing up.
growing up? Yeah.
Yeah, I had bad adenoids and tonsils.
Mm-hmm.
When I had them taken out, you know.
Did you have to go to the
I
hospital?
used to have
after taking it?
these sinus headaches, and I missed a lot of time in school
Uh-huh.
when I was 12, and then that's where they took the adenoids and tonsils out. Big operation.
All right. Can you talk or elaborate about your parents? Did they talk about their parents or their childhoods at all?
They were pretty close with their siblings. You know what I mean? My
Mhm.
aunts and uncles.
How many aunts and uncles did you have?
A lot of them. I mean, I don't know. Offhand, I couldn't tell you, maybe 6 or 7 or 8. You know.
Any stories?
Yeah, well, they were all pretty much the same, you know. It was prohibition. They used to make booze in the bathtub.
So you were born in 1928, which meant that you were growing up as a youth in the Depression.
Right.
Did that have an impact on your life?
No.
Um,
Regardless of what, you know, they show on TV, you know. I mean, my father had a job and he worked, you know, regular work. If you had a job, you were okay, I think, you know.
Hey Dad, I can hear you rustling the paper. Only if that's a problem with you.
Was there any financial difficulties growing up through the Depression? You mentioned your father maintained a job.
No, not really, that I can remember. Now, I know they rented the house, you know. They didn't buy a house right away. When my father lived with his mother for 7 or 8 years, my sister was born there.
You weren't living with your
No,
with your
but they,
grandmother?
you know, my mother and father sort of took care of his mother.
That wasn't an unusual situation, right? Having a multi-generational
No.
house.
No, everybody took care of their parents, I think,
Hmm.
as best they could.
Was your dad happy with that arrangement?
Was I?
Was your dad happy with that arrangement?
I don't know, but he was. I think he was glad to get away from his mother.
Hmm.
You know, like he said, after he moved to Thomas Avenue, he says they were so happy to have their own place. But he thinks they would have probably had more children had they lived there.
Longer.
Yeah, away from his mother. You know.
So can you talk about the house on Thomas Avenue? What kind of house was it? What kind of conveniences did it have? And things like
Just a
that.
row house,
Hmm.
and where we lived, and then of course we bought the house. My father bought the house next door to us.
So first you were renters, and then you were owners.
Yeah, yeah, he bought a house.
Okay.
And it was a really good, much better house. We had a garage, and we had hardwood floors. It was really nice.
Did you have a phone?
Yes, we had a party line,
Hmm.
and I can remember one night someone called the house and told my father to turn down the goddamn radio. It must have been the party line.
Can you talk about your mother or your father?
Yeah, my mother was, she was a work. My father was a drinker, but I mean, I'm not saying this to exonerate him, but at that time, the working men would always stop at a bar to have a brew, you know.
Hmm.
But sometimes he would stay for too many brews.
Hmm.
And I can remember my mother used to say that, George, don't stay out tonight, you know, for some reason. And he would still stay out. And I guess, like I said to Betty, that my wife, that I think that's the reason why I don't believe people right away. But, you know, they say they're going to do it, but they won't do it, you know what I mean?
Trust.
I don't know what you would call that.
Were you embarrassed by his behavior?
Was I what?
Embarrassed?
Yes. Yeah, if my father came down the street, you know, half tipsy or something, I'd sort of go crawl under the bed and hide.
Hmm.
No psychiatrist, just a bed.
Did you have your own bedroom?
Yeah, for a while until my sister got married and they moved in,
Hmm.
and I went down on a sofa bed down in one of the rooms downstairs.
Now, did you have any chores as a kid?
Chores?
Yeah.
No.
You didn't have to, shovel the coal or
Well,
empty the ice box or anything like that?
Yeah, we would empty the drip can and take out the ashes and stuff. Yeah.
Hmm. So after Mount St. Joe, you went in search of a job, or you were already working during Mount St. Joe?
Well, you know, it was 1946 when we graduated. The war was over, so I was in high school all 4 years of the war. Okay?
Right.
But the draft was still on. We were going to be drafted. And like Frank and all the guys I went to school with, some were before January the 1st, you know, their birthdays, and some after. And the draft was still on, but if your birthday was before January the 1st, you had to go to summer school to make up that, second part, to get your diploma.
Right.
And in my case, they let you go till June, and after you graduated, they would draft you, you know.
Were you afraid of joining the army, or you
No,
wanted to?
it was just a national. We drafted. You went down and took the pre-induction physical, and it was a given that you were going to go in the army. You know.
So the end of the war, 1945. Describe what that was like.
There's a minute 40 left.
1945, the war ends. Do you remember what you were doing, like when the war
Yeah,
ended?
we got on a streetcar for nothing. Went downtown and watched running around people crazy, wild.
Mm-hmm.
One guy was hanging on the side of a bag with naked with a barrel around him, and you know, it was just bedlam.
Were you personally happy that you wouldn't have to be part of the war effort?
Well, no, I never felt that way, you know.
Mhm.
Anyway,
So, from 1928 to now, 2017, the world has changed a lot.
mm-hmm.
What do you see as like the greatest change?
Well, I don't know. It's the greatest change. Everything changed, I think. You know, I think TV was the best. The other change was the church. They stopped Latin and went to English. You know what I'm saying? Which was I thought was stupid.
Let's talk about the church. How much of a role did the church play in your life?
Well, I don't know. I was an altar boy when I was, in grammar school, and
Your parents attended
and
church
I also
with you?
was in the Knights of Columbus, you know, as an older person, and I think the church was very important to me.
Can you tell me where you've lived? Like you talked about Thomas Avenue. What other places have you lived?
That was the only place we lived.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you got married. Where'd you live?
Well, we lived in an apartment at Uplands, 4508 Dunland Road.
Mm-hmm.
Lived at Beachfield Avenue.
We paid $64 a month rent and $1 flat rate for the gas. And it was really a nice apartment.
Mm-hmm. Where were you working when you lived at Uplands?
I was down at Albert Palmer, Pohmer.
Working as a.
Yeah, as a rideman on a survey crew.
How did that come to be? How did you get that job?
Well, after the war, my brother-in-law, he got discharged, and we all went down trying to get a job. You know, I was out of high school, and a couple of guys like Johnny Basica, jobs were hard to get because they were getting ready to retool the economy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought we could go there and be draftsmen because we took drafting in school. But, you know, it just wasn't there. So Johnny, he joined the Army, and I'm still looking. And I went down with Herb, and he had these people that would get jobs for you, and you would pay a full week's salary to them
Mm-hmm.
to get the job. So Herb, who really liked photography, tried to get a job doing that, which he did get a job. And then the guy said, "Well, what are you interested in?" I said, "Well, anything that I can do to make money." And he said, "Well, you have a rideman opportunity." And Herb said, I said that Herb went to Poly, so he knew what a rodman was. He says, "You just hold the stick and the surveyor reads the numbers." Little did I know, later on they called that the idiot stick. So that's where I started, you know. And I ended up working with Palmer for 16 years.
What was it about that job that drew you to it?
I liked it. It was outside, and you know, it was interesting, I think. You know, mostly the surveys before building, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the big, you know, going into starting the original. Like one time we had to do a survey that George Washington had done earlier down by Camp Meade, and it was 50 acres, and there was a stone. The deed read the stone on the highest hill, you know, and it went on and on and on. And and the trick was to find the stone, so we spent all day trying to find a stone, and finally one of the owners that bordered the property said there's an old black guy that's working in Annapolis, and I'm sure he could, give you a hint as to where the stone was. So, being on the survey crew, my boss, we drove to Annapolis, found this black man, and he took off, and my boss paid him the remainder of the day, and he went to the stone. But little did they know that my friend Lynch and Lynch found the stone earlier, but we wouldn't tell Ollie because Ollie was our party chief. We would have started working right away, and it was about 99 degrees. So every time we get near it, Lynch would go shh, and anyway, when we got the black guy, he showed us the stone. We left. We came back the next morning, and it was nothing but cut brush for the whole 8 hours.
And heat.
Yeah.
Did you know Lynch before you got your job at Palmer?
No. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When I went with him, that's how we became friends. And like I say, he went to parochial school, had a lot of things in common.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to be a surveyor, or you had no idea about the job?
No idea what a surveyor.
Did you, when you were a kid, did you have an aspiration?
George Washington was a surveyor. So
Right.
That's the only thing. And I guess Lincoln, or all of them were.
So, how did you decide surveying is going to be my career?
Well, like I say, I started at $5 a day. I worked 5.5 days a week, so I got $30 a week. They give us $30 for the half a day. And as it progressed, and then when I was getting ready to get married, I asked Mr. Palmer if my job was safe, because by then, let's see, we got married in '52. The Korean War was on, and he says, as long as you're here, you have a job.
Mm-hmm.
That was
That job kept you out of the Korean War?
What's that?
Did having a job keep you from the Korean War?
No. In 1948, well, let me say, go back to '46, they stopped the draft. And, that's when I got the job. But then in 1948, this country resumed the draft. And Johnny Basica's brothers, they were all in the Army in the invasion, and all. And they, in fact, even before the war, they were in the National Guard. And they said, if you go into the National Guard, you won't be drafted, or it's up to you, So we said, why do we want to go in the Army when there's no war? You know what I mean? So we joined that.
The National Guard.
Yeah, we were there for 6 years.
And you would go away for weekends with the National Guard?
Weekends, and yes, well, you have your basic training and all after that. All right, the one thing I want you to say is that we didn't join the National Guard to keep out of the Korean War because the Korean War wasn't even started. We did it so we didn't have to go for 2 years in the Army, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because the war was over. It was about 5 or 6 guys we should play softball. And why should one guy join, and that's a big, but we were at Camp Pickett when the war broke out, and all of the old veterans that were, nucleus in the 29th, they thought they would federalize this and build a division. They're just cadres, But that never happened, and the reason we didn't think it happened for the 29th is because on Omaha Beach, the 29th probably suffered more casualties than any other Army outfit.
So it wouldn't have been fair for them to go
Yeah, it was
back first.
The 116th from Virginia, they were practically annihilated. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, they just went to another state or something.
So at this time, you're living in Uplands. You're newly married.
Yeah.
You have a job with Palmer.
Yeah.
Did you work for Palmer for a very long time? What happened with the?
I worked from September '46 until we got married in 1952. So that was 6 years.
You worked with Palmer for 6 years,
Yeah, before I got married.
and then
Then I went 10 more years.
With what company?
Mr. Palmer.
You stayed with Miss Palmer 10 years after getting married.
Yeah.
So, did you have opportunity, or did you think about setting out on your own to get a surveyor's license and form your own company?
Yeah, I did, but I don't think, in order to get a surveyor's license that way instead of going to college, you would have to, you'd have to gather all these surveys and keep them intact and explain everything and all,
Your friend Don Lynch, he got a surveyor's license?
Well, I was out in the field most of the time.
Mhm.
Real survey. The old surveyors would go to the field, do the survey in the field, come back, and then,
Draw a map.
computerize,
Mhm.
and do all the work that way. But it wasn't that way because the times were changing. The building started, so they had field crews that were out all the time, bring it back, and the people in the office would do it.
It was specialized.
Yeah, it really was specialized. Yeah, it wasn't like the old days of Washington or Civil War or anything like that.
But you didn't remain a rodman all this time.
No, I wasn't a rider. You run a transit. You were a transit man or a party chief, and that's what In 1950, I got my own crew.
Hmm. If you had a choice between working outside with a crew
Yeah,
or working inside at a desk,
yeah.
what would be your choice?
Hmm. My choice was outside.
Outside? Was there any person, like career-wise, was there any person who had a big impact on your career?
Well, I guess it's like Ollie, the party chief that we went to. He was a self-made man, and he worked for Mr. Palmer from a kid, and he really knew the outside. You know what I mean? It was really interesting to me.
You're in your early 20s now, working with Ollie. How old was Ollie compared to you?
How we were 18, 19.
18, 19 years old, and Ollie was how old?
Who, Don Lynch?
Ollie, the crew chief.
Ollie, he was 10 years older than
10
Don.
years older, okay.
Mhm.
Would you say this was the happiest period of your life?
Yeah, it was good. I think the happiest period in my life was when I was young. Growing up, the neighborhood.
On Thomas Avenue?
Yes. I mean, like I said, we sleigh ride till 10, 11 o'clock at night. Our parents were never with us like they are today. We played ball on our own,
No fear of anything bad happening to you? Like your parents were not afraid of that?
I don't know, you mean what, playing ball or?
Just, you described being away from your parents for long periods of time.
Yeah, well, I found a ball in the field, and it was a fairly new ball, and somebody said it was their ball, and I said, well, I found it. And this older guy says, give it to whoever it was. And I wouldn't give it to him, and he smacked me in the mouth.
Mhm.
And I had a bat, and I hit him with the bat.
In the head?
No, I don't know where it went, but I think it went between his head and his shoulder.
Uh-huh.
He didn't get hurt, I mean, I don't think.
What would you consider the biggest challenges of your life?
I don't know, I guess getting married, and then when Betty lost the baby,
Hmm.
yeah, that was tough times.
Were you ever worried financially in raising a family? You had 5 kids.
Not really, I don't know, money makes me nervous, but I don't like to have a lot of bills, you know what I mean?
What do you attribute that worrying about money to?
Well,
You ever think about why you worried about the money?
yeah, I think my mother sort of took care of the money in the house, and I just felt at ease if I didn't have any bills.
Mhm.
That's all I can say. I don't know how people can run up a big bill and hang it over your head.
Hmm.
That's the way I thought anyway. I still think that way.
What are you most proud of in your life?
But the most,
Most proud of? What are you most proud of?
the family, all your kids. I mean, it gets hectic a while, but I mean, growing up, I mean, you guys were, you had a challenge, but I never felt like you were bad kids. It's just what happened,
What happened?
Well, you guys wrecking cars and stuff.
We can edit that out, right?
Yeah.
Any stories about like historical events? Like, do you remember? You told me already about the end of World War II.
Yeah.
Any other historical events that impacted your life?
Well, I mean, like my father, when he died in the '60s, when they couldn't bury him until after the cold weather, and we went to the graveyard, and on his grave it's got, what do you call it?
PH,
The medal he got,
Purple Heart.
PH on the stone, and the guy was cutting the grass. I said, "Hey, what's that PH stand for?" He says, "Well, that guy got a Purple Heart." I said, "That's my father. He never got a Purple Heart." And I used to say to my father, "Why didn't you guys in World War I get a Purple Heart?" Well, I found out later they didn't give you a Purple Heart unless you were killed. In World War II, they were killed so fast. This is to accommodate, I think, or make the parents feel better. They gave it to you if you got wounded.
Mm.
So that went into effect, and any of the veterans from World War One,
Retroactive.
yeah, they retroactive, and they gave it to them.
Mm.
And then what happened is we got Kathy to write. I went to the graveyard, and they said write to the National Records in St. Louis, Missouri, the adjutant general. So because she had a good handwriting, she wrote the letter, and they sent the medal to my father. But my father had died; he never knew he got it.
You talked about your father. Is there any attributes you think that you have that you got from your parents, either your father or your mother?
Dad, can you say that question
Yeah,
again? but
I think I was quick to get
All right,
buried.
you
like
talk. Hang on a second. Let me ask you again. So, are there any attributes that you have that you think you got either from your father or your mother?
Yeah, I think I got a. My father was he'd be quick, but his temper, I think,
And you are like that?
Well, yeah, sometimes. I mean, I think you're like me. It
Yeah.
takes you a while to get mad, but then when you get mad. And my mother, I think, she was always the prayerful one. I think she sort of rubbed off on me too.
Any regrets that you have in your life?
No regrets.
If you were giving advice to a grandchild of yours, granddaughter, grandson, any advice for them? Any advice, like life advice?
Well, I would just, I think, try to do the right thing. That's the only thing I can say. I mean, and as long as you believe in yourself and you can do it, you can do it, whatever.
So, after living at Uplands, you moved to Emerson Heights,
Mm-hmm.
Forest Park Avenue.
Yes.
What was that like?
It was a good experience. We had the house, and we should have probably bought the end house, but that was $1,000 more, and it was the same amount of bedrooms.
What'd you buy your house for?
What?
How much was your house?
$10,450.
And how much was your down payment?
I don't know. I don't know. We put down like $2,000 or something like that.
Mhm.
There's 1 minute left. If
We're
you
pretty.
want
What made you decide to move from Emerson Heights?
Because we wanted a house, we had lost a baby, and then Kathy was born,
That's not what he
and
did.
then 3 years later, Michael was born, so we figured, get a house.
And then you left Emerson Heights and moved to Howard County.
Yeah.
Why?
Because, I don't know, the houses, it's sort of like now. They were getting more money for the house. We paid $10,000, and at the time that they started to move, we could get $30,000, and $20,000 to us was a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we got $30,000 for our house.
Any stories of vacations? Any places that you've traveled to that you found memorable?
Yeah, well, we weren't big travelers. You know, I like the trip down to Jamaica. You know, that your kids give us. You know, for our 80th birthday, for my 80th birthday, that was really nice. You know, and the trip out to California that you made for us. You know, the itinerary and all. And you know, I just going to North Carolina all the time, you know, or Ocean City or someplace, you know. It was always good. The kids seemed to get along then, and I think that's what keeps the family together. I mean, getting together maybe once or twice a year, all of you know, if you can.
Okay, are there any other stories that you want included in this interview, or?
Well, there was this one girl. She loved me, and I cried when she left me. No, I'm only kidding.
Okay.
Your mother had probably more to do with your family than I did, you know,
Right.
because she didn't think you guys, Kathy or Peggy, you never did any wrong. But I can remember this guy, my one son Bobby always said, "Mom, Dad knows more about us than you do."
That's absolutely right.